Welcome to North of 60. I'm Heidi Schweighofer. Today we're going to talk about advance directives. What are they? Do we need them? When should we get them? My guest is Deb Caldwell. Deborah is an attorney with training at Cleveland Marshall School of Law, same as my husband. She was the former assistant Cuyahoga County prosecutor, is certified in healthcare risk management, and is now the healthcare risk manager at Western Reserve Hospital. Thank you so much for being here, Deb.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I think that what would help me and help people who watch this show is to sort of do a little bit of a definition first. Sure. What are advance directives?
Well, in Ohio, advance directives consist of two particular documents. One is a living will, the other is the healthcare power of attorney.
So you say Ohio.
Ohio law governs these documents. So in other states, you may have other documents that might also be considered an advance directive, but in Ohio, it's pretty much those two.
I didn't know it was two documents for some reason.
Yes.
You hear the
Two
terminology
right.
as, okay, I thought advance directive was a thing.
Right.
So it's living will, healthcare power of attorney.
Right.
How does that differ from DNR orders? I keep hearing about DNR.
Right, and oftentimes people do associate DNR orders with this conversation on advance directives, but a DNR order is a separate document. It is a written order that a physician would write after consulting with a patient or a patient's family, again at the end of life, where a decision is made that they don't want to have CPR or any type of heroics. So it's a separate order. It's not really considered an advance directive. It's not a document that a patient fills out. And I get that question a lot because people think it's something that they can initiate. It's usually a conversation that's initiated by a physician at a certain point in a patient's care that they think it might be appropriate. And so it's a physician's order.
So it's not part of
advance directives.
Advance directives.
No,
I never knew that.
Most people don't. Like I said, most people associate, you just think of all these documents
Yes.
Together, but it is a separate thing.
All right. Mm-hmm. Do I need now, okay, I want healthcare power of attorney and a living will. Is my first step hiring a lawyer?
Not at all. You don't need a lawyer to do any of these documents. You can download the documents from the internet. They're freely available at no charge. And there's lots of information on the internet also about how to complete the documents and commonly asked questions. So they're pretty straightforward. You don't need an attorney, but you do, once you complete the documents, if you work with an attorney and you have other papers filed with an attorney, you might want to have your attorney have a copy of them.
Okay. What if I don't know how to use a computer? How do I go about accessing these documents?
Well, you could go to the library and have somebody assist you with downloading a copy. You can ask a family member. If you happen to be in a hospital, if you're admitted to a hospital, you can ask for the forms and they will provide the forms to you, although that may not be the best time to complete them, although sometimes it's necessary.
Can I ask my doctor's office? Do they normally have these forms?
They may, or they may assist you in getting them. They could download them for you. It's pretty easy to have access to them.
All right. Because we're always asked about them, aren't we?
Right.
I mean, it seems like I go to the dentist and I'm asked if I have advance directives.
Exactly.
All right. I want you to define some other things.
Okay.
End of life, terminal, life-sustaining.
Okay. Well, end of life, kind of as it says. Terminal, meaning the person is not expected to recover from their illness, and death may or may not be imminent. And what was the other thing you asked?
And the other one was life-sustaining treatment.
Life-sustaining treatment. are those treatments that prolong life. So that could be IV fluids, it could be a ventilator, it could be having CPR, dialysis. Those are considered life-sustaining treatments.
So Deb, then when I'm writing my living will, let's start with that document.
Right.
Do I say things like, well, unless I am terminal and have 2 months to live, I don't want any I would like all life-sustaining treatments.
Right.
I'm trying to not be silly about this, but I'm trying to be like, is that how definite we can we say that? We want this until this.
You can be specific. The form in itself kind of walks you through how to fill it out. And basically what that form does is it notifies the caregivers that if you are in a terminal condition, that you are giving them permission to withdraw life-sustaining treatment. But you can be specific because the document gives you space to write specific things. You know, some people are okay with CPR if their heart stops or they stop breathing, but maybe they don't want to be on a ventilator. Or maybe if I'm on a ventilator and I've been that way in that condition for a period of time, I don't want this to continue forever. So you can be specific within the document. It allows you to write free form. There is a space that you can indicate specifics.
So those are my specific wishes for what
Correct.
I would like to happen to me
Correct.
in this situation.
Correct.
Healthcare power of attorney,
Yes.
is that giving that permission to my daughter, for example, or my husband?
Correct. The healthcare power of attorney is a document where you are indicating who you want to be able to make decisions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Who you want to be able to make decisions if it reaches a point where you can no longer make decisions for yourself. So you're appointing someone, and you can appoint what they call an agent to make decisions on your behalf, and you can also name 2 alternates within that document. So it could be your daughter, it could be a son, it doesn't have to be a relative. It could be anybody that is close to you or knows your wishes, that you want to be able to make those decisions.
And I assume you'd want to have a great conversation with that person ahead of time.
Yes, you would be correct. You want to make sure that that person knows how you feel, because I think the misconception that people have is that once they're a power of attorney, they think, you know, they control everything and they make all the decisions. But the idea of it is so that they are carrying out your wishes. So you definitely want to have those conversations. It's ideal to have them, you know, ahead of time before you're in a stressful situation, where you can have an easy conversation with questions back and forth about what you want and how you want things to go.
Deb, a couple of weeks ago, I had as a guest, this is off the subject for 1 second, who was from a funeral home. And we talked about pre-planning funerals. Right. And I think that the idea of preparing while we still have all our faculties and we can control what happens to ourselves is just something that has really hit me very strongly lately.
Totally agree.
Pre-planning a funeral, pre-planning how we want our health care to go as we get into these situations.
I totally agree. And in this day and age with COVID and unexpected illness that can be quite severe in some cases, that probably comes into play even more.
I never thought about that. Because that could happen to any
definitely,
one of us.
to anyone, as we've seen how COVID has been manifesting. Like I said, very unexpected, can be severe very quickly. Definitely, you would be in a crisis mode in terms of making decisions and that type of thing. So even more reason to have discussions, at least have discussions, and maybe even prepare the documents ahead of time.
I couldn't agree with you more. This is hitting us at younger ages.
Yes, all ages.
When I have gone into the hospital for surgeries, I'm always asked this, and I mean, we've prepared these documents, but I always think, now why would you decide at the moment of going into surgery that you want to start doing these documents?
Right.
Bad timing, I take it.
Bad timing. Unfortunately, it happens quite a bit. Sometimes I am called in the hospital, in my line of work, I'm called to notarize documents that people are having to make, like I said, in a crisis situation. And we will accommodate that as best that we can, but it's not the best time to try to do that.
No.
Right.
All right, now let's assume I've got my living will and I've got my healthcare power of attorney. Right. How does my doctor know I have these?
Good question. You can provide your doctor's office with a copy of your documents. You can make sure that the people who are named in your documents, especially in the power of attorney, that they have a copy so that, number one, they know that they're the agent or the power of attorney and that they have proof of it, because depending on the situation, they may be asked to provide that document. So if you go into a hospital and it's maybe a planned procedure, you can take that document with you. So make sure your doctor's aware.
Okay, or send it to my doctor's office, make sure they have it, and it would go through the electronic medical record thing, I would assume.
Correct.
Okay. Does my doctor have to follow my instructions? I have been specific about I want these things unless I get to this point, and then I don't want them anymore.
Yes. Well, I would say they're going to make every effort to follow your instructions. If there's something that is, in conflict with what they feel is appropriate care, then probably they're going to consult with the family. But in most cases, they're going to follow the wishes of the patient.
Family conflict. That, I remember it as a nurse periodically, and I have seen that in many families where son wants all things done, daughter doesn't. Patient is sort of caught in the middle.
Right. And a lot of times that's how I get involved in situations in the hospital, is when there's conflict. And they sometimes will look to me to kind of reinforce, okay, what does the law say? What should we do in this situation? And what I advise our staff is that we try to not be a part of the conflict. Let the family, to the best of their ability, resolve this on their own without bringing us into it. But we will follow the law. So when there are conflicts, if there's no documents, then there's a specific hierarchy that the law dictates who can make decisions. So they look to that as precedence. If they have the documents, then usually that kind of resolves the conflict, because you're naming that person as the one who can make decisions. But if there are conflicts, again, we try to assist the family to resolve it within themselves.
What if I don't have, so you said there's a hierarchy. Let's say I have not done a thing and I have a son and daughter and I'm not doing well healthcare wise and I'm in the hospital. What do you do?
First and foremost, it's always, we look to the patient. So if the patient is able to still make decisions on their own, we go with what the patient wishes. If we've reached a point where the patient lacks capacity to make decisions, then we look to a substitute person to make those decisions, and we follow that hierarchy. So if there's a spouse, we would look to the spouse. If there's no spouse, then it's your adult children. And if there are multiple children, then we go with what the majority of the children want. Sometimes it does get a little complicated. The physicians are not required to contact everyone. They are just required to make reasonable efforts. So if we have a son and a daughter here who are physically here in the hospital and they're not on the same page, we just try to encourage them, give them information, do what we can to help them come to mutual agreement.
That must be hard, Deb.
It's very
such
difficult. Because we don't want to be
sad
put in that
time.
position to have to,
No.
dictate what happens to a patient.
No,
So.
no. One of the things that I experienced was my father I was his healthcare power of attorney. He had a living will. He talked with his physician and we signed DNR orders. This is when he was in his 90s, late 90s. And then he had he stayed at home. He would not go to any assisted living or anything. So then we had a number of ambulance visits because he would fall or he fell and he'd do his little pendant thing and in they'd come. What happens with them? Are they required to, if Dad had stopped breathing, and would they be required to start CPR? Even if I said, well, wait a minute, no, he's got a living will. I can't find it right now, but I know he does. Tell me about that scenario.
Generally, if you call EMS, they're going to do everything. Their role is to stabilize, rescue that person, and get them to a higher level or the appropriate level of care. So generally, they don't come in asking for documents or asking questions. If they're called, they're coming in to, assess the situation and stabilize it. If you present that information that you have the documents, then they would follow that. But if they don't, in the majority of the situations, like you said, they don't know or people are stressed out, they may not even remember that they have these documents, and so they're going to do what's appropriate for that patient. And the same with, if they take you to an emergency room, it's the same kind of thing. They're going to do what is appropriate in that particular situation. Now, if you present the documents, they will follow the documents, but it has to be in front of them.
So then, in safeguarding these documents, you'd also want to have a copy at home that would be easily accessible, assuming that you're an elderly person living in your own home.
Correct.
That was exactly the scenario that we didn't have because my father didn't believe in keeping them in a spot where anybody could access them. He was very he was a lawyer, and you're faced with this crisis. There's lots going on, and no matter what you say, it doesn't really matter unless you can produce the documents. So you are saying, have them in a spot also if you live at home and you're
absolutely
okay.
Have them accessible to
have them
someone.
Accessible.
Yeah, and at least make sure that someone is aware that you've completed the document, that you have it. And again, if it's a power of attorney, then you want to make sure that that person has a copy as well, and then there's no problem.
And we should also take that with our dad to the emergency room, so
if at all possible.
If at all possible. What about people who live in another state? In Ohio, there's a lot of Florida residents 6 months of the year.
Right. Lucky people.
I know. Isn't that the truth?
Right. So generally, states will recognize documents from other states. They don't really want to make people jump through hoops to have multiple documents, and you don't want necessarily multiple documents around. So as long as if you're going to another state, you take a copy of your documents with you. If you're there for that long a period of time, make sure if you have a doctor in Florida or wherever you're going, that they also have a copy. And again, even though it's from another state, they'll recognize that.
Okay. Are there any places where, if I travel internationally, that's sort of a long shot, but would one still want to have a copy of these documents with them?
I think as long as you have a copy, other providers are more likely to accept that, as long as they can see that the document is complete and looks like it's a legitimate document. Then again, I think when we run into problems is when we're just saying that we have it, but we don't have a copy in front of us. So.
Okay. That brought something to mind. Now, hang on. It wasn't just travel. Oh, shoot. It will come back to me.
Okay.
I just had another question relating to having the documents present. All right, I'll come back to it.
Okay.
What if I change my mind?
Good question. These documents are revocable. So at any time you change, say for instance, you have a healthcare power of attorney and you have a certain person named as the agent, and for some reason you want to change that, you can change that at any time. What you do is you would complete a new document and you would make sure you destroy the old document. If you go into a hospital and they already have your documents on file, each time, that's why they ask you every time you come in, they ask you, have there been any changes? So if you've changed your document, you would present the new document, they would scan it into your records and delete the old documents.
And delete the old document.
You'd also want to obviously make sure that the people involved are aware. If this person is no longer your agent, make sure that they know that, because that could be
conflictual.
Definitely,
Definitely.
And we have had situations like that as well.
I can imagine where somebody didn't
Right.
say, hey, I'm replacing you with your sister. And yeah.
And what generally happens is the document that's later in time is the one that rules. So if in a hospital situation we're presented with two different documents, whichever document was later in time is the one that we would accept.
Okay. Do you remember the talk, I think it was during Obamacare discussions about death panels? And about that you're going to be required to talk to your doctor about what you want in terms of living and dying, and then they're going to create these physician death panels who will decide on the quality of health care that you will get in the hospital at age 90 if you have. I knew it was we all knew it was malarkey. But are there situations where your health care is ever affected quality-wise by having these documents and specifying what you want? I don't know if that's kind of an odd question, but
I would say no.
Like the heck with him, he's gonna.
No, I would say in most cases, the providers that take care of you every day in the hospital aren't even aware. They may know you have a healthcare power of attorney because generally that person may be there or present themselves at some point. If you're hospitalized, they'll say, I'm the power of attorney, or something has happened where that situation has come into play where they need that person to make decisions. But generally they're not aware, and so it doesn't impact your quality of care. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't negate anything that the doctors would do in any way.
My father was always worried about that.
Yeah, that's a reasonable concern, but no, it doesn't affect your care at all.
I have another question, and I have to see if we have enough time. We do.
Okay.
When you elect to become a hospice patient, do you therefore elect, essentially, you don't need a living will, you still need, and I might be nuts here, but it seems like when you elect hospice, you're electing a course for the remaining part of your life of no heroic measures and, choosing comfort over active intervention. Is that then, does it negate the living will?
No, not at all. In fact, many hospice programs facilitate signing those documents. It sort of works hand in hand because, again, like I said, the living will is generally what you're saying, if I am in a permanently unconscious state, I want all care withdrawn. Whereas usually the purpose of hospice is pain relief and comfort care and that type of thing. So they kind of work hand in hand.
Okay, so being a hospice patient, you still need a living will, and you still should have your healthcare power of attorney.
You certainly could.
Okay, all right. We have 5 minutes.
Okay.
In 5 minutes, what would you tell seniors about advance directives and living wills, Deb?
I would say to be aware that a healthcare power attorney only governs health care. So it's not the same as a financial power of attorney.
I'm so glad you brought that
So
up.
some people think when they fill out a financial power of attorney and they're assigning an agent
Yes.
to take care of their financial concerns and pay bills and that type of thing, that it covers everything. It doesn't. A healthcare power of attorney is very specific and only covers healthcare decisions. So if you wanted to, again, have a financial power of attorney, keep in mind that's not going to be the same as the healthcare. And that person, sometimes we've had situations in the hospital where someone has come up to us and said, oh, I'm the power of attorney because we're in a situation where we need to make healthcare decisions. And they'll present a document, and the staff oftentimes will come and send the document to me or say, can you take a look at this? And I can remember a specific situation where I said, this is a financial power of attorney. And it unfortunately, we can't use that.
No.
It doesn't govern the situation here. So that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing, like I said, is try to do the documents in advance when you're not stressed out. Many families are hesitant to have those conversations, but you can't assume that everybody knows how you're going to feel, at the end of life or what your decision might be. And the only way to do that is to have the conversations. It's best to have it in a relaxed environment. We see all these news stories every day about COVID. That's a good time to initiate just a conversation about, if something were to happen, how would you feel? What do you think about that? Just in general, because people within the same family have very differing ideas and opinions about health care and end of life. So that's another thing. And then, like I said, just making sure that if you do fill out the documents, that someone has access to them. You can provide them to your physicians, or if you go into a hospital, we'll scan it into your record so it's always there. If you make any changes, we'll always ask, did you make any changes, so that we make sure that we have the latest copy.
That is going to go on my list of things to do because we have them. My husband has a copy. He's my healthcare power of attorney. But geez, I think that's it. I don't think I've given them to my doctor. I don't think they're anywhere but with him.
And I didn't even fill mine, or I had filled out papers years ago when my daughter was young. Lots of things have changed within that time span. So that's the other thing. Think about updating those documents.
Oh my gosh.
If there's been a change in a diagnosis, or you've had family members that passed away, maybe that person was named, which was my case. My parents had been named as my daughter's guardian, but they had passed away, and I had never updated my documents until recently. And I thought, and I kept saying, I need to do this, I need to do this. And finally I just said, do it, because anything could happen. And like I said, with COVID and all that's going on, it kind of makes you think, you can't anticipate when and how something's going to happen.
Isn't that the lesson of the day?
That is the lesson of 2020.
I think it has, I think it's hit everybody like that. We just don't know what tomorrow's going to look at. Even the president, of course. Well, exactly. So thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
This is North of 60. If you'd like to reach out to Deb, if that's Deborah Caldwell, I'll call her by her real name. We will make sure that you have that information at the end of the show. Think about this stuff. It's important, and it's important to talk about it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.